an artist in San Diego has a rare kind of photoreceptor. It lets her see millions of extra colors, beyond what most people can perceive.
One organism has 10 dimensions of color perception, another one has 4, we have 3. Some organisms see in 4 dimensions.
And later, we'll show you a mini experiment that can give you a hint of that experience. Then there is a strange phenomenon called alien hand syndrome.
Her left hand just started attacking her, started trying to choke her, and she had to fight off her hand with the rest of her body.
And one way to make sense of all these abstractions is through none other than this.
You might literally have sort of 2 consciousnesses.
And how all these ideas eventually boil down to consciousness and what it might look like if it were infinite.
Could be millions of dimensions, it could be trillions of dimensions. They're just sitting there. I'm something even more transcendent than space and time. Most people would think of as God. There's an infinite number of directions.
So let's delve into today's video. Before we start today's discussion, I want you to try something. Imagine a color you've never seen before. Can you do it? Maybe, but obviously it's not anything you see here on the color wheel. Here's the thing. When you zoom out, what we call color is simply the brain's interpretation of different wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation: violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. Just a very thin slice of what is actually out there. But what if I told you that, according to Professor Donald Hoffman, there may be color experiences you've never had and may never be able to imagine?
Apparently there are women called tetrafemmes who have 4 color receptors, not just 3. They apparently have a new dimension of color experience.
And this is what we call tetrachromacy. Normally, human eyes use 3 types of color receptors. Roughly speaking, red, green, and blue. But in tetrachromacy, there is a 4th photoreceptor, often described as an extra sensitivity somewhere between red and green. So instead of RGB, it becomes something closer to ROGB, with O being orange. The result is an entirely new range of distinctions most of us cannot access at all.
So these women are apparently living in a world of color that you and I can't even concretely imagine. No man can imagine them, and yet they're real color experiences.
Researchers like Kimberly Jamison have studied women with tetrachromacy. It is rare, but very well documented. The evidence suggests they are not just seeing brighter hues. They are perceiving an additional visual dimension altogether. As Hoffman puts it,
now take that little baby step. Oh, there are women who have color experiences that I could never have. Well, that's shocking. Now take that infinite. There are consciousnesses where every aspect of their experiences is like that new color. Deeper structures of their quote-unquote physical worlds could be quite different from ours.
Later in this video, I will show you a simple experiment. It's not tetrachromacy, so to speak, but it can offer you a tiny taste of how flexible color perception really is. And just to stretch your intuition a bit more, this is not limited to humans.
Some snakes like pit vipers and pythons can detect infrared radiation, heat emitted by prey. They can turn thermal energy into sensory signals. Butterflies have photoreceptors that extend into the ultraviolet part of the spectrum, and this enables them to see patterns on each other that guide nectar foraging. Eagles' retinas have dense arrays of cone cells, concentrated in deep foveae, which means they can spot small prey from over a kilometer away.
In tying all of this together, Professor Hoffman argues that we should stop treating physical objects, like particles and atoms, as if they're the most basic ingredients of reality. Instead, what is fundamental is how things change, and the probabilistic structure of those changes.
So rather than asking what is reality, he asks, how do states evolve from one to another?
And this is where something called Markov processes come in.
They're basically the simplest model we have to describe probabilistic change over time. A Markov kernel, for instance, tells you, given that I'm in state A, what's the probability I move to state B? Let's say that you're a very simple creature with only 2 possible states of mind: calm and alert. Every moment, your state might stay the same or switch with some probability. That behavior can be described with a matrix like this. If x equals 0.9, you stay calm 90% of the time. If y equals 0.3, when you're alert, you go back to calm 30% of the time. So this matrix Q is a single point inside a bigger mathematical object called the polytopes M2, which is the set of all such 2x2 stochastic matrices.
But it doesn't stop here. Since this whole vision of consciousness is really about dynamic systems and change, so what happens is that Hoffman introduces a dynamic law,
something called kernel flow. In kernel flow, the values of x and y evolve over time, depending on how far they are from the fusion line, this line right here, a condition where the two states become fused, also known as two experiences blending into one. This red path shows how this transition matrix evolves under the proposed dynamics. And so your calm and alert agent flows toward a new behavior, possibly one where the two states become indistinguishable.
Now, what if you have 3 states instead of 2? Well, in that case, the projections of this Markov polytopes would look something like this in 3D space.
So here's the key idea. When you collect all possible n by m stochastic matrices, you get a geometric object, a polytope living in a high-dimensional space. Each point inside this polytope is a valid world of transitions, and its shape encodes how systems can evolve over time. And so you can think of this as the area where reality lives, just like how physicists use spacetime as the arena for matter and energy. So the bold claim here is that Professor Hoffman argues that this space, the space of kernels, transitions, and fusions, is more fundamental than spacetime.
So the key takeaway from this is that our specific conscious experience does not apply to everyone or everything. It comes down to our own internal processing, constructed entirely in your mind and your mind only. So even something as simple as color is not a mirror of the outside world. It's something your brain constructs, a kind of interface built not to show reality as it is, but to help you survive and get by. And guess what? Once you step outside that little space-time bubble we live in, you start to realize something. There may be forms of conscious experience out there that are alien to ours.
3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time is a fairly trivial headset. Conscious agent networks are networks of consciousnesses that have no physical substrate and are entirely outside of space-time, and that create space-time as one of the more trivial user interfaces that they use to interact with each other.
I mean, imagine if our vision went beyond visible light. What if it shifted into X-rays, or all the way down into radio waves? Well, X-ray vision might be handy at airport security. Maybe you are like Lucy. You can decide which radio signal you want to tune into. Now take that idea and push it further. If there were an alien species hovering above Earth, their version of red might not be anything like our red. And if their spectrum extends far beyond what we can see, they might notice things in your kitchen that are completely invisible to you. Like when you heat up a bowl of soup in the microwave, they might actually perceive a glowing field of energy radiating from within.
These are possible varieties of conscious experience. It's real in principle, and yet completely beyond our understanding.
Think about it like the Twitterverse. There are millions of users and billions of tweets, so we have to have something to make it understandable. But ultimately what we'd like to have is some kind of like headset that allows us to see what's happening in Wisconsin versus Tokyo or whatever. And that's what space-time is, that some conscious agents use to understand their interactions with others.
I want to show you one more example of how extravagant conscious experiences might already exist all around us.
Let me ask you something. Can you tell which note is this? That is F sharp. And if you can actually got that right, congratulations. You are in a very small fraction of people who can do this naturally.
Hey. Another note? C.
What's amazing is that it's not just that he guessed the note correctly.
That's 3 notes.
E, G, C. Is how concrete sound is to him, almost like a tangible object.
Now it's closer to an F sharp. And if I just pour a little bit more,
Oh, man.
it becomes still an F sharp. But this will become an F.
To me, this feels a lot like a blind person asking, what color is this? And then being amazed when someone answers correctly. Because for the blind person, it feels like a superpower.
But for the rest of us, it is just obvious. Except in this exchange, it's us versus Charlie Puth. Hoffman suggests that experiences like this may not be rare at all. There could be an infinite number of conscious experiences like these. Entire dimensions of perception that feel perfectly ordinary to the ones who have them, and almost impossible to imagine for everyone else.
We're starting off with little trivial ones, like this conscious agent has only one experience. It can only see red. That's all it can do. You can take simpler agents and they combine in interesting ways to create more complicated agents. And so that turns out that one definition gives you a non-Boolean logic of all the Markovian kernels, which in our case gives us a non-Boolean logic of all possible consciousnesses. Because it's non-Boolean, there's no single top consciousness. Instead, it's far more interesting. There's an infinite number of directions.
So what might those other forms of intelligence actually be like? Well, maybe some of them can read intentions through electromagnetic signals. So in their world, nothing is hidden. Every thought and every motive is immediately visible. We're talking total transparency. And that reminds me of a scene from The Three-Body Problem.
Can't you lie?
What is known is communicated as soon as communication takes place.
So you communicate through thought, while we're still like barnyard animals squawking at each other.
We think we understand now. We cannot coexist with liars.
Whatever you say would already be known. Language becomes redundant when intention itself is the message.
Now it doesn't stop here, because things will only get stranger. There's a real condition called the alien hand syndrome.
Her left hand just started attacking her, started trying to choke her, and she had to fight off her hand with the rest of her body. And there are people who they'll pour a cup of coffee and then their other hand will just pour it out again. People who will get dressed, they'll put their trousers on and then the other hand will take it off again.
So even inside a single body, you can have two separate conscious processes.
Two different wills happening at the same time. It's basically like the emotional part of you wants to buy a new iPhone, but the rational part says no, you should save your money.
And so the two hemispheres are connected by something called the corpus callosum, which is the connective tissue. And the tissue actually seems to do more to inhibit communication between them than to facilitate it, as if there's some evolutionary benefit to kind of having two brains. And so it seems to suggest that you might literally have sort of two consciousnesses. It's like your brain is sort of battling against itself to figure out which one's going to win out.
Now imagine we try to recreate something like this split experience inside a computing machine. A system that can simulate two independent streams of agency and track each one separately. Can you think of something that already does this?
You might not expect it, but the answer takes us straight back to childhood: video games.
On one side of the screen, you have consciousness 1. It wants to compete. It wants to win. On the other side, you have consciousness 2. It just wants to enjoy the circuit.
When some dude is turning his wheel to drive the car, what's really happening when he turns the wheel is that millions of voltages are being toggled in a specific order in some computer, and it has to be exactly that right sequence for the thing to work properly.
Both players are inhabiting the same simulated world, but they are having fundamentally different experiences within it. Somehow, the console should be able to support this. And the moment one player interferes with the other, like a random collision, the system has to compute not just the physics of the crash, but how that event alters each player's experience of the world.
What this really shows is that the game developer already mapped out a vast space of possible interactions. Every outcome that could arise from multiple conscious agents sharing the same environment.
Car has to drive through the roads to get from A to B, but not if you look at the code. In the code, I just need to change the value of a register, and all of a sudden the position of the car is now at B. It was at A, and I put it at B.
Okay, now as promised, here's the experiment I mentioned before. All you need to do is stare at this.
Let me give you 15 seconds. Pay attention to what starts to happen. All right, if you saw some weird psychedelic stuff for a split second, drop this emoji in the comments. Now, if you're still not sure whether or not perception can be trusted, well, let's try other visual illusions. Here's the first one. There's actually no triangle, but your brain is inventing it to make sense of the negative space. The second one. This static image appears to move if you stare at it long enough. And so motion is an artifact of your brain's refresh cycle. And the last one. Which of the tiles is darker, A or B? You might think it's A, but actually they're the same shade of gray. Your brain compensates for lighting, even when it's wrong.
Now we're getting into one of the more mind-bending consequences that Professor Hoffman points out. It's the idea that the structure of reality itself might extend into an infinite hierarchy of consciousness.
Imagine yourself as Alex, 27 years old, living in Bergen, Norway. You are sitting in a coffee shop about to head to work, and you post a photo of your cappuccino. That's it. In that instant, your entire lived experience is just that one picture, that one post. 3 dimensions of space, one slice of time. Now imagine you could also experience life as Brenda, someone else entirely living in Palo Alto. While Alex is winding down for bed, Brenda is just waking up, posting a picture of her jasmine tea. And now imagine that you are both of them at the same time, seeing both posts, both timelines all at once. I mean, you are not switching back and forth between perspectives. You are simultaneously holding 2 streams of experience.
According to Hoffman, this is what happens when conscious agents combine. They do not erase each other, they fuse. The result is a more complex agent, one that contains and integrates both.
Now here's the thing. What if it is not just Alex and Brenda? What if it is not 2 consciousnesses merging, but hundreds, or thousands, or maybe even all of them? What would it feel like to experience the infinity of existence?
This is where a famous short story comes up. It's called The Egg.
In the story, a soul is told that it has lived or will live every single human life that has ever existed. You are not just one person, you are everyone. You are Genghis Khan riding across Eurasia, and centuries later, you are also a child in Mongolia reading about him in a school book. You are a Nazi soldier in 1940s Poland, pulling the trigger in front of this family. And then you are the son who survives, who emigrates to Israel, whose grandchild grows up, and later fires into a street in Gaza. But you're also the child in that narrow Gazan alley, not understanding why the bullet hits your body. All of it, somehow, is you.
What consciousness is doing, since the exploration of mathematical structure is in principle unending, perhaps the exploration of the possibilities of consciousness itself is in principle unending.
There is an old thought experiment in game theory that describes a strange kind of game. The rules are unknown. The objective is unclear. Every move reshapes the board in unpredictable ways. And no matter what strategy you choose, the game always ends in a loss. Now imagine life or consciousness itself is that kind of game. What if existence is about witnessing? So there's nothing to conquer, nothing to prove, and nothing to solve.
Only the unfolding mystery of a universe that is not indifferent, but very much alive.